Uber or a Lyft in just a few weeks. June 29th is the official launch day, and the law that passed for ride-hailing includes a requirement for background checks on prospective drivers. However, it also allows level 1 sex offenders to obtain the permits necessary to drive, a loophole that has some people rather concerned. Our next guest is a sponsor of a bill to close this loophole. With me to talk more about this is Suffolk County Assemblyman Dean Murray. His district is also getting ride-hailing services on the 29th. Yes? Well, we don't know,
or maybe
actually.
Not.
Maybe not. No. So we'll get to that in a moment. First of all, this is one of those things, I mean, I don't know if this is something you guys overlooked or it was the result of maybe rushing things into the budget. I mean, this is one of these examples of why you should have done this as a standalone bill.
Oh, I agree, 100%. Yeah. And we said that during the debate process was these are certain bills, certain policy issues that don't belong in the budget process because, you know, things can get missed in the details.
Right.
And that's apparently what happened here, although, you know, we brought this up during the debate on the floor of the Assembly.
You knew,
yeah.
Or you made it known.
Yes, I brought it up during the debate and was told it really wasn't in there. It wasn't a concern. And when you've got your 15 minutes to do the debate and you're standing on the floor and you're being told, no, it's not in there, when yes, it is in there, you move on to the next item and then hope that they were right, and you find that no, they really was in there.
So if I got this correct, when you do the background checks for these drivers, there's two registries that you actually have to check. There's the national and the state, correct?
Well, yes and no. They'll check the registries, but to get your license, it's only based on the national registry, and the national registry only has the level 2s and 3s. They do not have the level 1s. In fact, they're prohibited from putting the information of level 1 offenders on the national registry.
Well, and also, I mean, in the state, being in level 1 is a fleeting experience, right? And that's something that you and I have discussed in the past. You would actually like to see that be longer.
Yes, it's 20 years now. I'd like to see it extended to the 30 years. And part of the reason for
that's
that...
not really so fleeting, but I should say that there's a timeline.
There is.
Okay.
For 2s and 3s, there isn't.
Right.
A 2 can request to come off later, but a 3 is on for life, and 2s generally are too. But the level 1s are the ones, and they've started coming off. As of January of 2016, level 1 offenders have been coming off. And the reason this raised a lot of red flags, in seeing this, we saw examples of many that were classified as level 1s, but really should have been 2s or 3s.
So right, this is a conversation that you and I had before we came on the air. I was under the misinformation that a level 1 was you know, not like child pornography, for example, or some really of the more egregious sexual crimes. But your information has been, and talking to district attorneys, that you often have people pleading down.
Right, and that's what happens. They'll plead down to avoid going to trial or something, and the carrot that gets dangled is, well, we'll drop you to a level 1 because eventually then you can get off the registry. So then the person being convicted or tried is more apt to accept it. And this is what we found. But there's also been misclassifications as far as, I mean, it's not a precise science. So again, I had a conversation with the DA last night on the drive up to Albany. He was explaining a situation where there was one that was borderline level 3, a rapist, it was a violent attack, and yet he was classified as level 1.
But I mean, it seems that, I mean, that sounds like an anomaly, though. I mean, you don't think that that's...
Not as much as you would think. And again, that's what I've found in looking into this. I'm not saying it's all of them by far, but if you even say 20-25% of the level 1s, you're talking about hundreds and hundreds.
I don't want to, I mean, and obviously I know it's a controversial thing to say, but you know, sex offenders who are released and, you know, or did time or didn't do time or had some kind of plea deal, they have to work. I mean,
Sure.
Right?
But in putting them in a situation, during the debate about Uber and Lyft, and by the way, I agree with this argument, that it makes us safer because you have these millennials, younger kids that are now going out, they're drinking, they're getting intoxicated, and they don't want to drive home. So they grab their phone, they call Uber or Lyft.
Right.
Great. I think that's a fantastic idea. We don't want them driving drunk. But now it's 2 o'clock in the morning, they're too drunk to drive, they're very vulnerable, and they're calling, and when the Uber or Lyft driver comes up, it's a convicted sex offender. Do you want your son or daughter climbing into that car?
Well, what about the standard for the traditional taxis? I mean, what is that at this
You know what,
moment?
honestly, I don't know. I was asked that on the way over, and we said, also, what's the situation in the city? We
because
never
they've
debated
had
that.
ride-hailing in the city for quite some time. Yeah.
That didn't get brought up because the city was completely
But
excluded
isn't that
from this
also,
debate.
doesn't that sort of undercut your argument? Because the city, I don't know what the standard is.
No,
in the
I don't
city,
either. That's
but
what
they
I'm saying.
haven't had a rash of rapings.
Well, they
people
might
who are
have this
getting
in place. I don't know. I
Right.
don't know if under there in the city, the licensing agreement allows a sex offender to drive.
So
This was in this bill.
Understood. So specifically, your bill does what exactly?
Well, what we would do is a very simple fix. In addition to checking the national, you will also, if they are on the state sex offender registry, then they will not be allowed to drive
So are
while
you-
they're on the registry.
Well, right. So you're okay because once they come off, then subsequently they would be eligible, even under
Yep.
your legislation, assuming that your other legislation doesn't pass
Right.
that extends the lifetime of a person being on a level 1. And where are we with this proposal?
Well, it was. It does have a Senate sponsor, and then I just, in talking to a majority member, they've also now introduced a bill as well. So we've got my bill and a majority member's bill, which I'm co-sponsoring with him, and Senator Croce is actually carrying both bills in the Senate.
Right.
So we're hoping somehow this gains traction and gets through before the end of session.
Is there any distinct difference between those two pieces of
Yes,
legislation?
the one that was just introduced by the majority member tackles a couple of other little issues that are tightened up, but the primary focus is the same thing.
Who said majority member?
What's that?
Who is this majority
I
member?
don't know if he would like me to say it yet, although I guess I can. It would be Joe Lento as he's introduced the bill. It's Assembly Bill
Right. Well,
8170.
he's the chair of the Codes Committee.
Right.
So again, I mean, it's interesting because generally speaking, the Democrats have they're gun shy of anything that increases penalties, right? And this isn't necessarily increasing penalties, but it would penalize people who are a level 1 who perhaps thought, well, this is good, maybe I could drive an Uber or a Lyft or I need a job. And so have you had any discussions with him about, how he might move this through the majority?
Well, again, he just introduced it, so we'd have to talk to him about his conversations there. But and I understand that line of thinking, but I also understand this line of thinking. We often hear, why are you guys so reactionary? Why do you wait until something bad happens and then you come in and try to fix it? Why don't you do something to avoid having it happen? I don't want there to be another victim because we didn't act on this, because we put a convicted sex offender behind the wheel of an Uber and Lyft, and they come in at 2 or 3 in the morning and pick
There have been
someone
some
up.
high-profile stories about,
There have
attacks
been.
but were those individual sex offenders? Do
You know what? I didn't research it. I didn't, but there have been stories about that.
Right.
In both cases,
Right.
Both the drivers or the passengers.
Right.
But again, why take the chance? And that's what I'm concerned about, because as we said, some of these level 1s are really more like level 2s or level 3s. We have had level 1 offenders that are rapists, pedophiles, child molesters.
So this is, and I speak of this at the beginning of the show, regarding sort of this deadline that tends to light a fire under you guys.
Yes.
When there are deadlines, sunset dates, etc. Not always, of course. I mean, sometimes things lapse, as we've seen with mayoral control, for example, in the past briefly. Do you feel like the June 29th deadline is really pushing, has some sense of urgency towards this? And again, you passed legislation already to move that up, right?
Which I voted against.
You voted against it
I
because
voted
of
against
this
it
issue.
because of this,
Well,
and I said it
also,
again on the floor.
It's possible that local communities will opt out, and you've got a local elected official who has introduced legislation
Right.
to do so until this issue is addressed.
Right. Legislator Leslie Kennedy is introducing a bill as we speak in the Suffolk County Legislature to opt out until this loophole is closed. And I'm hoping that other local counties, other counties will jump on board and say, hey, you know what, this is serious. We need to fix this. So we're calling on you guys, get this done and get it done quickly.
Well, Assemblyman, we will see what happens. Again, we're coming down to the wire, but it's all
We
new,
are.
so who knows?
That's
Thank you
right.
so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.